Hey everyone, Bravo Breakdown is back to recap episode 14, Reunion Part 2 of The Real Housewives of Rhode Island. And this is the final episode. Like I said before, I love all these ladies and I'm sad to see it end, but I'm happy because I know it has been picked up for season 2. I think they're actually going to start filming soon. I do hope all the ladies are coming back, but the news just broke that Liz will not be returning. She issued a statement that says, "I'm full of gratitude for the amazing opportunity to appear on this show. As filming for season 2 begins, I have made the decision to take a step back and focus on my family, my work, and my passions." The Real Housewives of Rhode Island cast is an amazing group of women who have created something special. I'll be watching next season, rooting for the continued success of this franchise. For now, I look forward to enjoying this little corner of the world from the other side of the camera. Okay, Liz, so I guess bye-bye. But guess what? You'll always be an OG. And I do like Liz. I thought she was great on the show, but I could tell she wasn't feeling it. I think she puts up a really tough exterior, but I think she's really super sensitive and she's really, yeah, she just puts up a tough exterior. She's squishy inside. I feel like she's very loving, actually. I feel like, when you're on a reality show like that, you're on the defensive. So I think that's just the side of her that we saw. And just saying, I think Joellen is killing it for her first reunion. She totally understood the assignment, and all her receipts were right on her phone. She really did make Rulla look bad. But I have a soft spot for Rulla. Just out of secondhand embarrassment, honestly. Like, your first season, you come on this show, you think your husband's affair is over, and it's just not. And you had no clue. He's out having a grand time with someone else while you're being tracked. With all that being said, Joellen's side, if I was being called a liar, like Rula did to Joellen all season about bringing truth to your face about your husband's affair, you bet I'm going to have everything lined up for the reunion. So I think Rula's incredibly smart, but there's something about her that just seems aloof. Like, it just kind of it's not matching up, and there's just something deeper there. I don't know what it is. This is just saying my opinion. Okay, so let's just get into it. So Reunion Part 2 starts off recapping the altercation between Joella and Rula that ended the Reunion Part 1. Rula says to Joellen, "I'm way more important than you are, bitch. Sit the fuck down. You're a slut, and the whole city knows it." Joellen looks right directly at Rula and says back, in the now iconic Housewives history books, "Ya husband's a slut." Rula says, "Fuck you. You sleep with doctors. You have it out for my husband and you sleep with doctors. I don't know what's bigger, your mouth or what's between your legs." Joellen says, "I'm going to break your fucking nose." And then Rula points to all the ladies saying, "You know, you know, you know." And Joellen says, "Know what?" So here's my deal, Rula. If you are going to accuse someone of cheating on their husband with doctors, bring receipts. Let's see why you think this. I have not heard her say anything in this season to back up any of her claims that Joellen is unfaithful to Gary. Let's see why you think this. Like, here's the opportunity. Here's the reunion. It's just words at this point. Like, at least Joellen has proof. Liz then says to Joellen, "You don't sound like someone with good intentions with all of this." Joellen says, "Here's the thing. I started off with good intentions and being nice." Rula says, "Go deal with your own life. I'm sure you got enough dirt and you know about it." Joellen says, "You get a new nose, new personality." Andy pivots this hamster wheel conversation over to Rosie and asks, "What's the status of her house?" Rosie says, Rich says, it should be done by mid-July. He again asks about the square feet. Rosie says that Rich says to tell people it's a 5,000 square foot project. Looks at Kelsey and says, "Is that satisfactory with you?" Kelsey says, "I don't care about the size of her house." Andy said, "Well, it seems like you do." Kelsey said, "Well, at the beginning, she said 8,000. And Rosie says, "I can clear this up too." And Andy nods. There was going to be a second floor or a third floor. Kelsey then gets up and is like, "You know what? I'm going to get my binder." And Andy gets her to change her mind and come sit back down. Because he's like, "We won't be able to talk about you if you're not here." Andy then says, "Okay, let me ask a question. There was some chatter that Dolores said Rosie didn't like her being there and that you were the reason she didn't film that much." Rosie says, "Do I have power in this all?" Andy says, "No." Rosie says, "I couldn't even go get my binder." Rosie says, "I met her a couple of times and and I'm very surprised to hear this." Andy then asks Alicia how she met Billy. Was it love at first sight? She says, "No, he was a stalker. He was very persistent, but that's how he won me over." Andy's like, "A stalker?" She's like, "Yeah." Andy then asks about a wedding date, but she says not yet. She is talking about it, though, with Billy and her friends and her daughter. Mentions maybe doing it in Greece. That would be cool. She is still not driving Selena to dance. She says it's an hour there and an hour back. Anything over 20 minutes, I get anxiety. Andy says, "Let's talk crackers." And she immediately replies, "I love a cracker." Andy says, "A lot of people want to know if you will come out with your own line of crackers." She said she is working on this with the oyster crackers people. Andy asks how she stays so lean but eats so many crackers. She says, "Jane's Fonda. I love Jane's Fonda," and that her aunt trained her on Jane's Fonda. Um, so cute. He said, "Do you eat protein?" This was, I think, the funniest part of the reunion for me. He says, "Do you eat protein?" She says, "Not a lot." But then she says, "I do almonds." And Andy says, "Elements?" And the group quickly corrects him, saying, "Almonds." Her? She goes, "And maybe a turkey pepperoni with a cracker." Yes, again, about Pizza Mama ownership. And she says, "I guess I'm getting something. I don't even know." Kelsey then tells Alicia to have her own bank account, first for her money from the show, endorsements, and her cameo. Andy says, "Do you not have your own bank account?" And she says, "There's a woman in charge." Andy's like, "Do you know her?" And she's like, "We text." Alicia says, "Billy put this person in charge." This is just too funny. Andy then asks who in the cast has a prenup. Rulla was the only one that raised her hand. Andy asks if Alicia has been put on the house yet, and she says she's in a trust, but she has no idea what that is. Rulla then starts to explain what a trust is, and Alicia says this stuff makes her bored. Ashley chimes in and says, "Look, as I got to know them more, Billy and Alicia this season, she says Billy is such a good man, and there is no way he would ever leave you with nothing." Rosie and Kelsey then get into a little tiff again. I'm really over their fight. I love them both. I just love them. They're both so gorgeous. They both bring it to this franchise. But just saying, as a viewer, it's evident Rosie doesn't like Kelsey. For whatever reason, not everyone's meant to like each other. She just doesn't like her. It just is what it is. It's fine. Okay, so now Andy asked Kelsey to talk about her brain tumor. She says in 2014, she was hit by a drunk driver, and her lawyer told her as a precaution to get checked out. They did a CT scan and found a golf ball sized tumor in her brain. She admits she put off brain surgery to compete in Miss Rhode Island. Um, and if she didn't get that golf ball tumor removed, she would have lost her peripheral vision. Andy says, "What do you say to the rumors you were an escort?" Kelsey says, "I have never sold any of my holes for money. Let's just get that straight." Kelsey believes this to be an actual escort from Boston that was hanging out with people she knew, kind of posing as her. But it's over now. And she says she's never been an escort and she would never be an escort. Andy starts questioning her situation with the ex-sugar daddy. Kelsey admits in the beginning there was jealousy, but she met the other woman and they had an agreement not to be posting on social media. Andy also knew that her prior boyfriend dated Paula Abdul, and Kelsey admits she stayed at her house once. Andy asked, "How did you guys even meet?" And she was like, at a tanning salon that Joe Ellen worked at. Kelsey said when her ex found out that this reality show that they were being considered for was now going to be Housewives, he didn't want anything to do with it because he actually watched Housewives. Kelsey did reveal that Bill now pays for her car, but she is paying for her own health insurance. All right. There we go. I knew she was going to pick it up. She's making money now. The music then ramps up and Andy turns to Rulla and says, "How are you and Brian doing?" She says, "Doing a lot better. Day by day, working on things." Andy asked the ladies who think she was really sick during this season. Rulla says she was to the hospital twice, on her back for 14 days. She was really fucking sick. Rulla admits Brian was saying and doing things with the mistress this past summer so she wouldn't go buck wild. Andy asks, "Why was he tracking your car?" Rulla says, "I still don't know." And I'm like, still? I'm like, didn't this come out in October? It's the last week of June. Like, I don't know. This is what I don't understand. Um, and then Joe Ellen says, "Do you remember me telling you that he was tracking you?" Rulla says, "Maybe." Andy says the husbands will be out in a little bit and we can move on. He then brings up Alicia's Spanish teacher, who was previously married to Brian. This then leads into the time frame being questioned of their relationship and marriage. Joellen asks Rulla, "What year did you get introduced to Brian?" She says, "Why?" Joellen says, "Just wondering." Rulla says, "No, bye." She then says, "What year did you get married? When's your anniversary?" "Why can't you answer? When's your anniversary?" She said, "We met in 2013. And Joellen says, "And what year was Brian divorced?" She says, 2010. "So when did you get married?" 2016. And then she's like, "Well, why are you asking all these questions?" Joellen says, "Brian didn't get divorced until 2016. And then she says, Joellen, he has the divorce document." And then Joellen says, "Oh, so do I." She again presses her for her anniversary date, and Rulla says, "Ask him when he comes out." Joellen says, "You can't say your anniversary date? That's none of your business." This just doesn't look good for Rulla. This is kind of really embarrassing. And then Andy's like, "Well, what's the accusation here?" And Joellen says, "Well, are you really legally married?" Rulla says, "I'm 100% legally married." Joellen states they actually aren't married and that she got pregnant when Brian was still married to the Spanish teacher. Rulla calls her a psychopath. And Joellen smiles and giggles and says, "I know." Joellen says, "Well, Brian must be a polygamist because he was married to you and the Spanish teacher at the same time." Cue the dramatic music. Joellen then shows Rulla her phone with the court records. She says, "Ask him all the questions," and he comes out. Okay, now what we have been waiting for. The men join the group. The music gets intense, and Andy says, "Welcome back." He starts going around the circle, kind of touching base with every guy. Andy says to Jerry, "Mazel on the grandbaby." Bill says he picks out every single lemon seed for Kelsey. Billy says the pizza business is good. Brian says the bunion business is staying one step ahead. Rich says Sinatra Sundays is going great and they've added another show. Andy asks Jared if the ice machine is fixed. And Jared says, "Oh, do you know what's funny? Is the guy who manufactured it reached out and was like, I want to fix it for you. The ice machine is now working great." Andy says to Gary about going shirtless in the sauna and says about the dad bod. He asked them then to clarify the timeline because of the relationship with Joellen's sister. Gary says he met Joellen in high school. He did know her sister earlier. They were best friends for a guy and a girl who didn't sleep together. He says he will not donate his sperm to Jen, Joellen's sister, but he did get a nice fistful of boob in the 7th grade. It's just, I can't. Andy again welcomes them and says, "I actually hear you guys are all good friends." And Rich says, "Yeah, we actually all went out to breakfast together this morning." Andy says to Kelsey, "Now that you are only with Bill, plans for wedding, plans for a baby." Kelsey says, "When I tell Bill to drop, he will." Andy looks at him and Bill says, "Absolutely." Andy circles back to Jerry about the rumors of Liz, saying that Rulla and Brian called you about Liz being with another man at Block Island. He asks if Rulla and Brian called him about seeing Liz with another man. Jerry says, "No, a friend calls." And then Rulla says, "Aha." And then says, "And put Brian on the phone." And then Rulla's like, looks stupid again and looks stunned. She did not know this. Jerry said he was told she was dancing with another man. Liz says, "Again, we were separated. All of his friends were around. I wasn't trying to hide it." Andy asked Billy if he has changed the prenup with Alicia, and he says it's touchy. "I do regret that, and I wish it was handled differently." He offers to take Alicia to the estate attorney so she can ask any questions about the trust. She says, "No, that's too boring." Billy says he's been persistent about monthly meetings to go over their finances. And Andy looks at Alicia and she's like, "A meeting?" And they all laugh. Andy says, "Billy, I'm starting to sympathize with you." Billy says Sarah is the office manager and bookkeeper. Alicia is mad she has to go through Sarah. Billy says, "I will give Alicia more if she will drive Selena to dance." He then says, "Actually, Alicia, I have a little agreement here for you." And honestly, I thought he was going to pull out a ring for her. I thought he should have had a ring at their second engagement, but I thought he was going to pull out a ring. He pulls out this agreement, and it's for up to 50% of his shares with Pizza Mama with some obligations. And she's like, "Oh, I don't want half." And the ladies are like, "Sign it, sign it." She says, "I kind of feel bad, Billy." But she signs it, says, "Honestly, Billy, thank you." Annie then turns to Brian and asks, "How are you feeling tonight?" He says, "I feel great." And Andy says, "Really?" Brian replies, "Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before the Lord brings you back up." Okay. Andy says, "Some say going on reality TV in the midst of an affair is risky." Brian says, "I can't speak due to legal reasons. There's an NDA." Andy says, "You're in a lawsuit with this person," and says, "Well, let's bring her out." And everyone gasps. And of course it was a joke, but Brian is like, "Whatever." What, I don't know. So like, can he talk or does he have an NDA? Rula then says, "Well, I can speak to it." He opened a business. He made 2 individuals part owners to keep them engaged before anything was actually going on. I knew about it, but wasn't thrilled. Fast forward, they gave up their shares back to him. And Joellen chimes in and says, one of them actually sued Brian for funds and says, "I have a lot of time on my hands now to research this because I'm unemployed." Andy then redirects to Rula and says, she says all of them had to sign NDAs. We're then flashing back to the polo match. The theory was Brian's mom wasn't sick. It was the mistress calling and you had to go calm her down. Rula says no one ever said he was going to the hospital. Brian says he was actually at his parents' house. His mom ended up not going to the hospital. Joellen chimed in with, the mistress name, like she said her name, but it was bleeped out and said, "Yeah, I know you both sleep there and your dad found her underwear in the bed." And Brian's like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "I have the text." Rulla says, "How many dirty panties have you left in men's beds?" "Sorry, Gary." And then, okay, this is weird. Joellen says to Rulla, "Brian says your butt smells like garlic." And Ashley's reaction was like, "Oh my God." Everyone was like, "What?" I This is a weird insult. This kind of blew up, I saw on social media. I just don't get it. I've never heard an insult that says your butt smells like garlic. If you know what this means, I guess just let me know. I don't know. Brian says I had my black Hummer all day. I didn't have my Porsche with the red interior. He says he re-gelled his hair and he put his ring in the cup holder. Andy says, "I thought you said you gelled your son's hair." And he said, "This is preposterous." Joellen says, on July 17th, 2025, you purchased a $4,100 Chanel bag. Was that for Rulla or for the other one? Referring to the picture, the referring to the picture that was posted circulating at the polo event. Well, Joellen, you're good with these receipts. And then Brian says, "The only person I have ever bought a Chanel bag for is my wife." Andy says, "How many of you have heard rumors of Brian prior to filming?" Some people do raise their hands. Gary then says he saw Brian with the mistress at a restaurant called Hemingway's, and she was presented to Gary that this was her boyfriend. Rulla looks back at Brian and says, "Really?" Brian says this was a business dinner. Rulla says, "Obviously, this doesn't make me happy, but I know reps have taken them to Hemingway's, so I don't know. I wasn't there." Andy then asks about the divorce from the Spanish teacher. Brian said he was divorced in September of 2012. And Rulla said prior, 2010. Makes her again look bad. Brian asked Joellen, "What is your end game here?" Joellen says, "My point is, I was continuously called a liar." Joellen says, "I keep finding lies. I'm no longer a girl's girl." And Gary is supporting his wife and says she will not be called a liar when she has proof. The court documents don't lie. Court documents say March 2016. Joellen asks, "Okay, so when did it end? When did the affair end?" She reads a text from November 2nd that he was still texting the mistress. Rulla says, "I didn't know." Rosie then interjects and says, "Look, we know you didn't know. We just need Brian to confirm when it ended because she's not going to stop." We all agree Rulla didn't know and it's not her fault. Rosie says if Brian can just admit when it ended, we can move forward. "Okay, Brian, here's your chance." And what does he say? "Unfortunately, due to the non-disclosure agreement, I can't speak to it." I'm shocked. What a coward. The cast is shocked at his response. He does say he hasn't seen her since October 2025. Joellen says, "Survey says that's a lie. You sent your son's Christmas list to her." Andy says, "Rulla, it's your impression the affair ended when?" She says, "I don't know. October of last year." Rulla says, "I'm blaming you, Joellen, for continuing to put it out there and invade my privacy." Joellen says, "I'm not blaming Brian for continuing to put it in her. I don't know what else to say." Bam, another one from Joellen. Andy says, "Did you know going to the police would lead to his arrest for the tracker in the car?" He says directly to Brian, "Why did you have a tracking device on her car?" He says, "The case is dismissed and I can't talk." He says, "Though, but I'm glad this happened because I couldn't see her for 4 weeks and this made me know how much I love her and missed her and couldn't wait to be with her." Don't believe him at all. He's just saying that because that's what you're supposed to say. I don't feel anything from that. Andy says, "Looking at your face, Rulla, I feel you are still not over this." Rulla says, "I'm traumatized and trust needs to be earned back. Love was fractured and admits tearing up. It's painful every day." And I do feel for her. Brian then says, she's the glue that holds our family together. Yeah, it obviously isn't you, Brian. Rosie says, what are you going to do if this happens again? She says, next time, no forgiveness. Ashley looks her straight in the face and says, you know you're better than him. Andy then says, I want to thank the men for joining and dismisses them. And then they show the men kind of talking in the back. And Jared's right there. He's like, Jared? To Brian, he goes, you got to tell Rulla everything. Brian says, you should all thank me for making this show. Ew. No, thank you. So the reunion ends with final thoughts. Andy asks the ladies, anything you would do differently? Ashley says, I would have tried to be less nervous, be more fun, and more chatty. Rosie said, I wouldn't have said the polygamous thing. Kelsey says, if you are sincere about wanting to be friends, let's do that off the camera, and she agrees. Rulla says she would have shut things down harder or even sooner. Joellen says she would have been more private with Rulla and been a better mediator. Liz says hers was to care less. Alicia says, I wish I would have worn more makeup from a dog bite scar. I didn't even notice it at all. Too funny. They all toast with dirty Shirley's, but Liz then presents Andy with a mask, saying, you are our king of Rhode Island. And Andy says, this may be going in the clubhouse. What a thoughtful gift. That was sweet. Alicia leads the toast with how proud she is of everyone, and she loves everyone, thanks Andy for the opportunity, and says, we are so blessed. And that's it. Wow, wow, wow. I just have no words. This season is over. It was amazing. Brian looking bad. Wow. Why did he even come on if he couldn't say anything? I don't know. I feel for Rulla. So we will see where this goes. We already know, as I said earlier in the episode, Liz will not be back for season 2. Curious to see who they replace her with, if anyone. I hope all the other ladies will be back. And that's it for this Bravo breakdown on Just Saying. Thank you for listening, and stay tuned as I will be recapping season 20 of my favorite, The Real Housewives of Orange County. But I want to know, what are your thoughts on the first season of Rhode Island? Team Joellen or Team Rulla? Team Kelsey or Team Rosie? Send me a message, leave me a comment, and don't forget to like and subscribe to my new YouTube channel. Bye.